So in 2026, we are expected to have the largest average refund that we've ever had. Unfortunately, a lot of people are going to spend that refund on things that lose value. Now listen, I'm not mad at you if you decide you want to take a vacation and sink your refund into that. But if you're interested in finding out how to make that refund work for you, I hope you'll continue watching. So let's start out looking at why we may have this average refund that's higher than ever. It's really due to what we'll call accidental savings. If you haven't heard, there's been a lot of changes to tax law. There's been some things that were in place that have been extended, but they were expected to expire. Now, I'm not an accountant, so please don't take this as accounting advice. Consult your own tax attorney. However, a lot of people did not change their withdrawals with their employers, and so they're going to end up getting a lot more money back. And so that's where we get this additional savings. Before I forget, I hope you'll stick around for our pro tip at the end, where we'll talk about how you might be able to get you a home mortgage interest rate below 5%. The first thing that you could do with your refund to help towards the purchase of a new home is to work with your lender and increase your buyer strength. Now, there's several things you could do to increase your buyer strength. The first one is you could actually just pay off some old collections or pay down some of your high debt. So if you've got lines of credit that have the debt completely maxed out, paying those down some can actually help with your increasing your buyer strength. And that's a way to kind of surgically look at your debt and work on that. Now, you want to do that under the guidance of a lender, because you can do some things in there that actually decrease your buyer strength. And if you need a good recommendation for a lender, we've been in the business for over 15 years as agents, and we're happy to recommend you to a lender that can help you out. The second thing you can do to increase your buyer strength is to work towards bumping up your credit. So making strategic moves with a lender to increase your credit score. Going from 680 to say 720 actually could save you almost $200 a month in your mortgage payment. So that would be money well spent. The third thing you could do to increase your buyer strength is to work with your lender to get a rate buy down. So let's say the rate that you're looking at is 6.5%. And that's the interest rate you expect to pay with a mortgage when they've looked at everything for you. However, you can buy down that rate with most lenders. And the way that look, and this is a rule of thumb, and it could change by lenders and can change with the market, but a good rule of thumb is for every point, which is 1%, and that would be of your loan amount, 1% of the loan amount, you could decrease your rate by 0.25%. And so let's just take a quick example so that you have an idea of the numbers. So let's say you're getting a home, the loan portion of it is going to be $300,000. Now, with $300,000 loan, 1% or 1 point would be $3,000. And so for $3,000, you could pay a point and potentially reduce your interest rate. And so taking your 6.5% and you paid 1 point, if we subtract 0.25%, now you'll be paying 6.25. If you were able to pay 2 points, you might get close to being under 6 or right at 6, right? So 2 points would be about $6,000 on a $300,000 house, and that might get you down about 0.5%. So from 6.5 to 6. And that would be for the life of the loan, and that can make a big difference in cost over a 30-year mortgage. The next thing that you could do with your refund is to build up your buying fund. And so whenever you go to buy a home, there's going to be a lot of money up front that will be needed. And if you've got that money from your refund and that's in an account, you can use that to build up your buying fund. The first thing that you might run across would be earnest money. In some places, they'll call this a good faith deposit, but whenever you have found the house, the exact one that you want to make an offer on, typically you're going to have a earnest money amount due, and that changes by area and it's negotiable. In my area, at least in Texas, that's completely negotiable, but traditionally it's about 1%. So if we're using our $300,000 house example, if it's 1% would be $3,000 in earnest money. $350,000 house, that would be $3,500 in earnest money, or that good faith deposit. So that could be the first thing that you could use it for. The second thing under building up your buying fund would be closing costs. And so whenever you've gone through the whole process and you go to the closing table, they will have told you an amount in settlement charges or closing costs that you'll need, and it factors in all the expenses for the home buying process. And so you could have those funds available for your closing costs. The third thing around building up your buying fund is just for your down payment. So most loans, they're going to have some amount of down payment that will be expected. And I've done a whole video on that talks about what you should expect. However, in 3.5% to 20% is a range that you could be looking at. And so that refund could be put towards your funds for a down payment. And everything above the down payment in the cost of the house is what you would be getting a loan for. In some rare cases, especially for veterans, you may be able to qualify for a 0% down loan. So which of these things surprise you? Let us know in the comments. All right, the third category of things that you could use your refund for are for the overlooked costs. One of the first overlooked costs that I'll mention to you is utilities, and you may be paying utilities where you're at now, whether you're renting or you're in another home. However, there's usually some fees related to transferring. If you're going to a new location, a completely different city, for instance, they may have deposits that are required for water. And so kind of having a fund of money available for utilities can be really helpful. So a second thing in the overlooked costs where you could use your refund is maybe hiring professional movers. Now, this isn't really a necessity, but if you've got the funds, it's a nice to have. So instead of paying your buddies in beer and pizza to move into your brand new house, you can hire professional movers to get your things and hopefully be best protected as your things are moved into your new house. A third thing in the overlooked cost categories where you could use your refund is in new security upgrades. And this could be as simple as new locking systems, so new locks, new door locks, security locks. Also, if you use things such as Ring or some other security cameras into your new property, your refund could be used to put those things into place. The fourth thing in the overlooked cost is a sinking fund for maintenance of your new home. And so sinking fund is really just a term used to talk about a secondary emergency fund, right? And so it's not really the emergency, but they're things that you know you're going to have to do maintenance on your home. So putting some money towards that account on a routine basis, or in this case with your refund, you could put a big lump sum in there. So when the unexpected, but when you're a homeowner, you need to expect that things need to be maintained. But when those things happen, or when it's time to replace, or maybe the property you're moving into has a older air conditioning unit, for instance, you know that it's working fine now, however, you may need to replace it in the future. Having that refund set aside, and for that matter, maybe even your refund for the following years, could build that up. So I mentioned earlier in the video about our pro tip, and we talked also earlier about working with your lender to do a rate buy down with your refund. My pro tip for you is to kind of combine two strategies. The first one is using your refund to buy down your rate, because remember that 1 point could get you about, or 1% could get you about 0.25% off your interest rate. And so let's go back to our example. We had a $300,000 house, a mortgage rate of 6.5%. We were going to put in 1% to knock it down to 6.25%. But the pro tip would be you could also request through your agent in your contract to have the seller pay some additional concessions. And as long as those are allowed by your lender, that is totally acceptable. And so let's say the seller was willing to provide $6,000 in concessions, or 2 points, remember? 1 point being 3%, 2% would be $6,000 for a $300,000 loan. And so you're paying the $3,000 from your refund, you're getting $6,000 from the seller, that's $9,000. And on a $300,000 loan, that could be 3%. And that could put you under the, under 6% if you're at 6.5. But let's say you actually qualify for 5.75. Now all of a sudden you could be at 5% or lower. And so that's a pro tip. The next thing that you might be thinking about is, what does it really cost to buy a house? And in that case, I'd have you watch this next video.